Good evening and welcome to the City Council meeting for April the 20th, 2021. We will begin by asking our City Secretary to call the roll. April?
Yes, ma'am. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Bachner?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Councilman Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Solis.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will take a moment of silence to reflect upon the service of the educators in our community, particularly that of Harold Cade. Mr. Cade recently passed away after a lifetime of service to students in our community, even earning a spot as a namesake of Cade Middle School. Thank you. Seating in the council chambers remains limited to allow for social distancing, and there are still many residents in our high-risk population. For those reasons, we will continue allowing citizen participation through video conferencing. To learn about all the ways you can watch the meeting and participate remotely, we encourage you to visit www.victoriatex.gov/talk-to-council. There are many options for how you can participate in our meeting tonight, ranging from watching on TV or speaking in citizen comments through Zoom. Mr. Garza, do you have any announcements this evening?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, or afternoon, I should say. But we will be here through the evening. We do have two announcements today for you. The first one will be from our City Attorney, Thomas Gush.
Good evening. At our most recent City Council workshop, Council discussed the possibility of having a charter review committee established for the purpose of reviewing the city's charter and potentially taking some charter amendments to the voters for consideration. After that meeting, several of you have nominated community members to be a part of that committee. And just for the purpose of the community awareness of this, I wanted to make the announcement tonight and to thank Jeb Lacey, Michael Atkinson, Dwayne Crocker, Tony Kniebel, and Decatur Joseph for joining the committee. There will be others added later. And I know that Mayor Pro Tem Solis is calling this ad hoc committee. Just as a reminder, there's no need for a formal committee or formal council action to adopt the committee. The chair can always appoint an ad hoc committee to oversee certain business, and that is the case here. Ms. Solis will be bringing together this committee, and we will be organizing a schedule to get the process started. I have reached out to outside counsel Charlie Zeck, who I will bring to a later council meeting to introduce himself. Charlie is an attorney out of San Antonio whose expertise is in charters for cities, and he will be helping us review the charter for specific legal issues that might need updating. And so that process we hope will kick off this summer. The goal will be for the committee to review the charter, make recommendations about potential changes. We'll also be seeking feedback from city council members, of course. And then we will pull together ballot language by the fall so that it could potentially be considered on the ballot in May of 2022. So we're kicking the process off, and we welcome feedback from the committee members and from the community and from council members. Do you have any questions?
Will you be contacting the members of the committee?
I will be contacting the members directly myself, and I'll be reaching out to them to schedule exactly when the kickoff process will start. That may be a little bit down the road. Like I said, we want to get the committee running this summer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I do want to also ask Christy Yoker with our Keep Victoria Beautiful program to come up and also provide a brief announcement.
Good afternoon. I am here to announce something very exciting. Keep Victoria Beautiful is launching this month, and it is a Business Beautification Award. So in order to recognize and encourage businesses and community members to keep up their spaces, and especially businesses, we want to reward those that we drive by very frequently and say, wow, they have really done a great job. So we are launching that this month. We're going to do it monthly, and we are asking for nominations. The best way to do that is on the website at victoriatx.gov/KVB, and you can click right on there and just give a quick reason. And it doesn't have to be something really elaborate. It can be something as simple as, some potted plants and a nice new sign. It can be really nicely kept landscaping. So anything that you see a need to recognize a business. We love our local businesses, and we'd like to give some recognition. We have some judging criteria that the board will look at the monthly board meeting. This month, the deadline is Sunday, April 25th. So if you have somebody in mind, a business, please go online. And they're going to get a nice big sign they can put wherever they want. They're going to get some recognition in social media. We're going to do a news release and make a big deal out of it. So that's all I
How
have.
often do you plan to do this?
We're going to start doing this monthly. And I
Okay,
think
so-
it will catch on is the idea.
Uh-huh.
And so we're very excited to launch it. The board is very excited.
Okay, so you'll move the sign from one place to the other, so that way.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah, so if you have the sign, then you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
I guess that,
Those are the two announcements that we have for this evening.
Okay,
I guess that means that somebody could be nominated and then a couple months later nominated again, get the sign back.
okay.
Yes.
We have a competition going.
Yeah.
So today you have it, tomorrow we'll have it.
That would be really awesome.
Yeah. Now we have public employee recognitions. Mr. Garza, will you please help us to recognize some important people and their achievements?
Absolutely. One of my favorite parts of the meeting. We do have one public recognition today and one employee-related recognition. I'll start with the public-related recognition. We would like to recognize two residents who are able to join us tonight, which are two residents out of four, who have demonstrated a commitment to becoming engaged citizens through their involvement with the various citizens academies that we have. The Communications Department created the Distinguished Citizen Award, and this comes to individuals who have completed the Civilian Police Academy, which is an 11-week program hosted by the Police Department, the Civilian Fire Academy, which is put together by the Fire Department and is a 4-week program, and of course, the Citizens Academy that Ashley and her team are more directly involved with, which is a 9-week program that many of you had a chance to go to the graduation recently too. We're obviously very excited about having this level of participation from our citizens, and we'd like to highlight them. And so I'd like to ask Lisa Imhoff and Janet Lassa to come up. I believe they're still here to receive that award again. And we did take pictures, so we got that out of the way. But thank you so much. And I'm going to read really quickly the plaque. It says, "The City of Victoria affirms that the citizen has completed the Citizens Academy, the Civilian Police Academy, and Civilian Fire Academy Citizen Responder Program, and is hereby granted the title of Distinguished Citizen in recognition of outstanding citizenship, commitment to self-improvement, and dedication to the Victoria community, conferred this 18th day of March, 2021. Thank you. And just brief shout out to the two residents that couldn't be here tonight, but also received similar recognitions. That's Debbie Pilsner and Sherry Husak. And so we want to thank them as well for their commitment. Next, we want to, as always, recognize one of our rock star divisions that I feel like we talk about almost at least once a month. And if you guessed Municipal Court, you're absolutely correct. And so I first want to recognize our Victoria Municipal Court Clerk, Elizabeth Montes, who recently earned the title of Certified Court Clerk 2 on March 17th from the Texas Court Clerks Association in conjunction with the Texas Municipal Courts Education Center, the Texas Municipal Courts Association, and Texas State University in San Marcos. Montes also earned her Associate of Arts degree from Victoria College during the fall 2020 semester. She has worked for the city for almost 3 years and holds an Associate of Science degree in Business Management as well. And so we want to obviously thank her for her service and congratulate her as she continues her educational and professional pursuits. And I hope she's still here too.
Yes, she
Okay.
is.
And if Tiffany was doing this, she'd tell you that it's a team effort. And I think the next item represents that. This also involves, of course, our amazing Judge Heinold and the rest of municipal court staff who recently were honored for impaired driving prevention with through the Traffic Safety Award on March 30th from the Texas Municipal Courts Education Center. And so I know that Tiffany's team is here, and so is the judge. And so we want to obviously congratulate them as well on that achievement. And I'd like to, Judge or Tiffany, I don't know if either of you want to add any words to that, but you're welcome to if you like.
I would just like to say thank you for the opportunity to serve Victoria. We have worked very hard at getting Victoria's municipal court on the map and recognized as an efficient service for this community. And I am especially proud of the work we've done to highlight our traffic initiatives and make sure that we have a safe community that we can all travel in and enjoy. So thank you for your recognition, and thank you for everybody, all the hard work that we've all done. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one that I want to kind of add a little bit of a last second addition. The team isn't here in its entirety, but there was a press release that was released today that recognized our city for financial transparency and ethical accounting. And I think it's appropriate considering the item that will come later in the meeting. But I think it's important to note and reassure and reaffirm and just remind everybody on how great our finance team is. This is the 38th consecutive year that the city has received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And so obviously, they've been under great leadership. And I think that whole time was with Gilbert, right, Gilbert? Almost. In any case, so we just want to obviously recognize our entire finance department and, of course, Gilbert, our CFO, for the amazing continued work that they do to help us have a well-run organization. So thank you to Gilbert and your team.
Okay, now, for items from council? Jen?
I have two.
Okay.
I would like for us to discuss the Tanglewood subdivision's street situation, the city's bonding capacity, the capital improvement program that we've been looking at, specifically looking at Tanglewood. There might be some others that you want to look at, but the scope has changed significantly, and I'm not at all comfortable that after waiting 6 years, some of those streets will get fixed and some of them aren't even in the capital improvements program anymore. And part of it is a factor of what we're trying to do with our bonding capacity. And I'm not so sure, especially with some of the limitations coming up on the rates, the tax rates that we can charge, or the increases that we can bring into the tax rate without it being extreme and taking it to a vote. I'm not so sure that giving up some of our bonding capacity is the way that I recommend us going. And I see that I must not have understood something because Mr. Reina's kind of squinting, but I'm probably putting it in different words. But anyway, I would like for that to be something that we discuss. And I know the capital improvements program is coming up soon, but I especially want to look at a couple of different aspects of it. That was one. Secondly, we're a city manager-run organization, and council sets policies. And I've noticed in the last probably 6 or 8 months, there have been several items that come up on the agenda for action that have been initiated by a city council member without them bringing it up during citizen communication for us to have a chance to sort of do a head nodding and see whether or not it's something that that we want to spend staff time fleshing out. And so I don't know whether we need to have a policy. I'm not so sure that I want it to rise to the level of being in the charter. But I would like to propose that we talk about maybe having items for action in terms of ordinances or resolutions first come to council, not in that capacity. And some of you are a little confused, but there's an item on the agenda today that was initiated by a council member as opposed to being initiated by staff. And it just kind of threw me because it was the first time I had heard anything about it. Maybe I was the only one. And I'm not taking issue with that particular item so much as just the concept of whether we all want to run off and utilize staff time for our own particular items that we want the council to do and hope we get enough votes at the meeting, or whether it would be more appropriate to discuss it under items from council before we go so far as to take it to action. That's my thoughts. And I know that we can't discuss it because I'm bringing it up without it being on the agenda.
Anybody else have any items? Because I have one. Okay. Transforming downtown is only the beginning of a revitalization plan that should now extend to Queen City, Silver City, and Southside neighborhoods, thus creating vibrant communities where Victorians can live, work, and raise families. Therefore, I request the city manager, commission staff, to put in place a neighborhood and commercial revitalization plan for Queen City, Silver City, and Southside. I understand that such a plan would require the use of federal, local, and private resources to improve the quality of life for the community. However, this is such a small price to pay considering the positive impact it will have on all Victorians. Thank you. No more items from council, therefore citizens' communication. As a reminder, citizens' communication may be done either in person or through video conferencing. We would encourage anyone who has had any recent exposure to COVID-19 or those that may be in a high-risk population group to make use of the video conferencing option. Those instructions are available at www.tx.gov/talk-to-council. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes in duration and will be received by audio only. There will not be an opportunity to provide any presentation or visual material, either in person or via teleconference. Please remember to silence all cell phones, televisions, and other background noise so that we can clearly hear your comments. It is generally the practice of the City Council not to respond to comments during this time, but city staff will be available to follow up as necessary. I do have 2 comment cards. One is from Michael Vonderon. Okay. You want to come up?
Hi, I'm Michael Vondro from 2204 East North Street. I just wanted to thank the district attorney for one of the big criminal prosecutions over someone in the trailer park. We've been having lots of criminal activity. It all started in 2018 when the trailer park owner hired a trailer park manager who was under indictment for organized crime, and it went downhill from there. And she did give him the maximum sentence for a DWI, the second, Class A, 365 days. So appreciate that, because that's 1 year apiece I have, you know. And wanted to thank the Special Crimes Unit, Victoria Police Officers, Victoria Sheriff's Department, and everyone else. You know, we had someone that beat someone up, you know, in the park, and they had to get a restraining order, I mean, a protective order, and they made email contact to the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department, and the owner, he's turned a blind eye to the trailer park and the problems, and there's really no manager that gets involved, so you're kind of on your own. And one of the problems we have are DWI cases. People zoom in 30, 40 miles per hour through the park, and it is a gun-free, drug-free zone, you know, even though people still use illegal drugs and, you know, substance abuse issues like alcohol, and this goes on 24 hours a day, and, you know, they can't really keep up with all the crimes. You know, there's some arrests from a year ago that the DA hasn't even had a chance to file charges because there's so many different charges, and I just wish people could stay away from that park as much as they can, you know, especially at night. And I just wanted to appreciate everything. And a lot of people don't know on DWIs, if you have a kid or something while you're driving drunk, that's not a misdemeanor. That's a state jail felony if someone's under 15 years old. And if someone, if you have a .15 or more, that can make it go from a Class B to a Class A. And we do have a overall problem with DWIs in Victoria. You know, a lot of times people are under the influence of liquor and they get in an accident and they hurt children, you know, in other vehicles and stuff like that. And I just hope maybe they could start making them serve anywhere from 2 to 10 years in prison or something to show people it's not okay to drive and drink. You know, this happens all the time, and they do have what you call enhanced DWIs, where they can give you anywhere from 15 to 99 years, and habitual DWIs, where on your fifth one, you can get 25 to 99 years. And I would just wish people would stop driving and drinking and just act civilized. And if there is a death because of a DWI or serious bodily injury, I would like to see them get prison time and no probation, because I personally think the DWI laws are too lax, the state laws. I think the first one should be a state jail felony, and that's from 6 months to 2 years. I don't have time to tell you everything because we don't have enough time, you know, because there's probably about 5 other people I want to speak to.
Right.
But thanks for
I
having me.
appreciate it, Michael. Thank you. Next, we have Colonel Mike Petrosh.
There we go. Madam Mayor, Pro Tem Solis, and honorable councilmen and women, it's a great day to be a veteran, a great day to be a veteran in Victoria, Texas. I'm Colonel Mike Petrosh, U.S. Army retired. I'm a resident of Victoria since 2008, and the founder and director of the Warriors Weekend Field of Honor since 2009. You know, it's that time of year again, and we will honor those who have faithfully and honorably served in the United States military. And we do this as the nationally recognized organization named Warriors Weekend that began in 2007. We encourage our wounded OIF and OEF warriors through a weekend of relaxation and rejuvenation, both here and in Port O'Connor. And we post Patriot-sponsored flags in honor of anyone who has served in the armed forces of the United States at any time. We call it the Warriors Weekend Field of Honor. First, I want to thank those of you who support the allocation of hot funds to the Warriors Weekend mission. Those funds contribute to us bringing encouragement and, yes, even life-saving healing to those soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen who have been wounded in combat during their deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, I want to encourage all of you patriots here and those of you who are maybe listening to this message or seeing this message to honor a veteran by sponsoring flag. The cost is still only $40. It's been that way for the last 13 years. The proceeds help us bring in the wounded veterans from all over the country for Warriors Weekend. And now we are honoring our local area heroes at the newly constructed Texas Golden Crescent Gold Star Memorial, which is adjacent to Parkway. You know, I want to personally invite you, Madam Mayor, and all of you city council members to volunteer with us when we post flags, the sponsored flags, on Saturday, May 1st from 0900 hours and continuing until the end of mission. You'll be amazed at the reaction of your veteran constituents and their families at the simple act, but it's a profound act, of posting an American flag in their honor. Their emotional reaction is really not that difficult to understand. Many of their comrades in arms have been laid to rest underneath that flag. Also, I want to extend an invitation to you all for 2 additional significant events during the Warriors Weekend season. I want you to save these dates. First one is May 21st, 2 p.m., 1400 hours. Approximately 250 warriors will convene at a welcome ceremony at the Field of Honor. That's at 4802 John Stockbauer, just adjacent to Parkway Church. This is a special time for them and their caregivers who accompany them. It's also a time for us to give them an amazing Victoria, Texas welcome and show them what right looks like. I want to again brag on the next generation for a second. This past Saturday, several of my core team volunteers were out there, and we were joined by head coach Roland Gonzalez, Coach Christian Gonzalez, and Coach Jeff Herta, and approximately 40 football players from East High School. Now, I'm going to brag on them. They manually drove in 1,600 pieces of 4-foot-long, 3/4-inch rebar that will support those flags, and they did it under 2 hours. They're all great Americans, and once again, I can report to you that 85% of the rebar drive volunteers were 18 years old and under. They get it, and they will be at the Warrior Welcome Ceremony. Finally, again, I want to extend a personal invitation to all of you to attend the dedication ceremony of the Texas Golden Crescent Gold Star Memorial that we have erected. And what that does is it honors those 400 plus soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen from the 7 counties that make up the Golden Crescent, who made the ultimate sacrifice while serving this great nation. The memorial will be dedicated at 8 p.m. on Memorial Day. That's Monday, May 31st, and we'll follow up with a formal invitation to all of you. I again want to thank you for the opportunity to address you and encourage you to come out and visit with us and the Warriors who get the amazing opportunity to visit Victoria, Texas. I know they'll want to thank you for your support to Warriors Weekend. God bless the United States. God bless our veterans and warriors and their family. And God bless Victoria and all of you who strive to make our community, ours, a community of honor and excellence. Charlie Mike, continue the mission. Colonel Mike, out.
Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.
Do I have anybody else in the audience that would like to address the council?
I do, ma'am, but my presentation, it's regarding the safety of the residents along the newly reconstructed section of Crestwood, East Crestwood, where I'd like to comment on the striping of it. It's going to take more than 5 minutes or more than 3 minutes. Could I make a
Yes,
motion?
sir.
Could I
That's
ask,
fine.
Mayor, could I ask to put it on the next?
Yes, you
agenda?
have it. You have my permission.
I'm sorry, pardon?
Yes, you may go over the 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen of the City of Victoria Government and Streets Department, as residents that live on the newly completed section of Crestwood between Laurent and Ben Jordan, I would like to present a petition signed by 100% of the available residents, 38 of 52 and climbing, between Ben Jordan and Laurent Streets for reconsideration of the striping, which added a center turn lane the entire distance on a 30-mile-per-hour road. We are all concerned about the safety of our families caused by the new road layout. The road already hosts speeds well above that, and now the center lane dangerously serves to move the high-speed traffic closer to our front doors and serves as a high-speed passing lane to those of us that obey the speed limit or are making right-hand turns into our homes. As others have admitted, if someone is hanging on our bumper because we are obeying the speed limit, we drive around the block to prevent them from knowing where we live and retaliation. I have here and presented Councilman Mr. Jeff Balknight copies of pictures taken from my home security cameras of this high-speed passing lane in use. We are simply petitioning to have this residential road restriped as a reconstructed section between Ben Jordan and Sam Houston is, which moved the 2 lanes of traffic to the center of the roadway and added shoulder areas to both sides. Just as it does there, this restriping would serve to move the high-speed traffic away from our front doors, but since we lost driveway parking length due to the wider sidewalks and road, it would also serve to add side-of-the-road parking for when we host extended family or events, garage sales, etc., or even simple package or appliance delivery. But unlike there, since we no longer have barrier curbing to deflect out-of-control cars away from our yards and houses where our family live and play, it would give us a safety zone from that speeding traffic. I also have a picture of a resident's vehicle that was struck on his yard in front of his house, which prevented the out-of-control vehicle from striking his or his neighbor's house and or family members. His neighbor now parks the older vehicle on the traffic flow side of his driveway to protect his wife's newer car. I ask, is this the way we should live? We are only asking for the same consideration afforded to the 9 residential homes of the above-mentioned section. As I talked to the 38 and climbing fellow residential property dwellers on Crestwood during the petition drive, I was made aware of their concern for their family from the high-speed traffic also. They no longer allow their children to play in their front yards, afraid of them getting close to the road, or as they chase their toys or simply play on the sidewalks or in their own front yard. Parents and residents close to the corner of Crestwood and Laurent, where the school is, also expressed concerns for the young kids that walk the sidewalks during and after the time the school speed signs are flashing. As I walk Crestwood for the petition drive, 100% of the residents I talked to signed on to the petition to get the road restriped as it is between Ben Jordan and Sam Houston to get the traffic away from our homes. I personally talked to the police department and was told that they are too short-handed to add patrols to this newly finished road, so traffic flows as fast as they want, all hours of the day and night. I spoke with Mr. Tim Gill of the Streets Department, and because the police are unable to patrol this speedway, he finally agreed to consider to install radar speed signs after arguing that they don't work. That was April 16th. As I have been told by multiple officials, I am aware that the city views Crestwood as a thoroughfare, but it is a residential road with homes and families on both sides of it and limited businesses. I guess this thoroughfare ends at Ben Jordan because that is where the road striping changes, with 9 homes only on one side. I, as well as other residents, have a graveyard of stray animals in my backyard that have been hit by speeding vehicles over the years, and I shudder to think of the family that will need to bury a child because of one. All 100% of the question and then petition signers simply ask that you give us 50 residences in the area between Ben Jordan and Laurent, as well as those on the current zone under reconstruction, the same safety zone that you gave the 9 houses in the short distance between Ben Jordan and Sam Houston. We all feel that our safety and property use has been sacrificed to the high-speed thoroughfare traffic flow. Once again, we only ask for the same consideration you gave to the 9 residents down the road. Thank you for this time. We all pray you reconsider this setup, the residents of East Crestwood. And the pictures and the petition and a copy of this presentation is available if you want it.
Thank you. Appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Is there anyone else?
I apologize. I didn't know I needed to register ahead of time. I've kind of been in a hole for the last year, like a lot of us, I guess. But I got my second vaccination 2 weeks ago, so I'm celebrating by coming to a city council meeting tonight. You're welcome. I wanted to talk to you about something that we're experiencing at Midcoast. Most of you know that we serve homeless individuals. We have a couple of different programs, but one of them is through the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and that is to keep people in their own homes. They have a program called Rapid Rehousing, and that's for people who are literally homeless, where we can get them in a place and help them stay stable. And then the other is homeless prevention, and that is usually considered eviction prevention. The reason I want to talk to you about that is because we had a board meeting last week, and I was shocked at the numbers of people that we've helped since this last year. Beginning in fiscal year 2020, when the pandemic hit, we served 26 households, which represented 290 people with homeless prevention funds. This year, that number has doubled in the first 6 months of 2021. We have expended almost $500,000, and we are no longer taking applications because we can't help people anymore. The reason why this is so concerning at this point in time is the CDC extended the eviction moratorium, but the Texas Supreme Court has declined to enforce it or to uphold it. So we know evictions are fixing to start happening again. We are hopeful that there will be more CARES Act money that we can access, but at this point in time, it's not been guaranteed to happen. So I come to you with a couple of reasons. Number one is there's a tsunami coming, and I'm really worried about what's going to happen in Victoria. When people are struggling to pay their rent under normal circumstances, they have a couple of ways to remedy it themselves. They can borrow money from family members, they can work a double shift, they can get a second job. There are several different strategies that they can do, but when under the circumstance of the pandemic, everybody was in the same boat. There was no money to be borrowed from relatives or friends. Even moving in with another renter is not possible because that often nullifies their lease agreement. So what we're concerned about is the impending eviction that's coming up. But I'm also hopeful because I know that we're all going to see stimulus money coming again. And hopefully some of that is going to come to the city of Victoria. I'm not sure how you're going to make those hard decisions, and I don't envy you for doing that. But I do hope you'll consider that our renters who are most at risk of becoming homeless need rental assistance. We need the city to work with the federal government, with the state government, and together I think we really can help people stay housed. What I'm afraid of is it's going to snowball, and in a year from now, we're going to be seeing our people living on the streets. Those numbers are really going to have increased. So I'm going to be the canary in the mine and tell you that there's a tsunami coming, and let's not get caught on the wrong side of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any citizens wishing to speak through the video conference? James? No? Okay, thank you. So we have items for public hearing. April will read the items with public hearings.
Yes, ma'am. Item C1 is an ordinance adding section 22-25 of the city code to prohibit the use of engine brakes and retarders.
All right, so as has already been stated, this item stemmed from a request from Councilmember Lofgren. And Councilmember, if you don't mind, I can go through a very brief presentation, nothing, it's pretty straightforward, pretty basic, and then obviously we can answer any questions council might have. So just really quickly for the benefit of everybody who might be watching, engine brake, or known as Jake braking, it's really just a concept that large truckers can utilize instead of utilizing their traditional service brakes to be able to more easily maneuver the truck and slow down. The issues with it is that it can be noisy, and there's been a lot of literature around it that also attaches community livability attached to it just because of the nuisance component to it. There's some literature that confirms that it's really roughly 10 to 20 times the sound pressure level of a jackhammer. And so it is something that can be a nuisance if it is something that's ongoing. And I know that Councilmember Lofgren brought forward some areas of concern, specifically including the area on the Loop and Navarro or 77 North, where all the trucks that are trying to get to 77 North, are obviously exiting Navarro, right by where the Olive Garden is and kind of that area. And so that seems to be an area of concern, which was what caused Councilmember Lofgren to bring this forward. When we did the research on this, we realized that it had been discussed before, back in 2013. And we did find in the minutes that at the time the police chief recommended against it. I think Mark's in the room, and he said that he spoke to Chief Craig last night, actually, and Chief Craig couldn't remember why. But in any case, council didn't take any action back then on the item. We assumed that it had something to do with enforcement, since it isn't something that can be very easily enforced. But in any case, we also found some data that this is also existing in not only small but large communities, and so we listed out a few there: Marble Falls, Dallas, Austin, Snyder, just to name a few. I know one of the very first things that comes to mind is, well, what's in the ordinance, and then how do you implement it? What's the enforcement aspect of it? Just very briefly, the ordinance would define that the usage of that break is a nuisance, as I've mentioned. It would be applicable to inside the city limits and even 5,000 feet outside city limits, and violations could lead to misdemeanor. So pretty straightforward. In terms of the rollout of it, signage is obviously important. And so as we were having this conversation internally, we thought, well, realistically speaking, the majority of the signs going into literally our city limits are obviously TxDOT roadways, which, as you know, those signs have certain standards. And we have existing city limit signs. And so we posed the question, how many city limit signs do we have? There was a más o menos, Ken's words, he said más o menos 30. And we received the más o menos quote from TxDOT too, about $300 each, which if we just multiply that, that's $9,000 if we wanted to just all at once roll out signs. We know that in terms of implementation, it would necessitate some coordination with PD, especially if there are known areas, such as the one that I just verbalized. And staff also has identified some other potential areas, all relevant to the loop, because of course the loop serves as a way for trucks to just hit any highway going in any direction. And so it's at those exit points that there could be some concern. That's it, pretty straightforward. Happy to answer any questions. And Mark, I apologize, Chief Deputy Jameson is here to help answer any enforcement-related questions in the absence of Chief Arredondo, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Garza, the 30 signs would be just around the loop, or are they throughout the city?
No, we would try and place them in locations coming into the city limits.
Okay, so we have 30 signs coming into the city?
Yes, estimated 30,
Okay.
welcome city
Okay.
with our population, those
those
traditional
signs,
signs,
okay.
you're entering city limits. But obviously not all of those are pathways for the trucks, right? And so typically, a truck that would be using the brake would be coming in through a highway, which of course is TxDOT.
Okay.
So we don't anticipate that we would have to go the route of putting 30 signs up, but we wanted to share sort of what would be the worst, quote unquote, worst case, impact on us if we did place all the signs everywhere, and the cost that would be associated with that, which would be close to $9,000.
Well, we wouldn't have to put them, I think they just need to go on TxDOT roads. And how many roads would that be?
I'm not sure, but we can get a number if we, really just specifically said, TxDOT only. We can certainly do that. But obviously the ordinance is a city limit thing, not just TxDOT road thing. And so for the enforceability aspect of it, it's no different than speed limit, right? And so, a police officer has to witness somebody speeding, and, you gotta have a speed limit sign, right? And so it's no different in that sense. It's a very similar process, and I'm sure he will correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I'm right?
Mr. Jameson,
Ish?
I have a question for Mr. Jameson.
98% right. Well, come up and talk about the 2%.
Más o menos.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Temp and members of council. What questions do you have that I can answer?
How difficult do you think it's going to be for the patrol officer to enforce some of these exits where the jake breaking is going on?
Well, as I shared with the city manager, the only issue with it is that, as he was beginning to explain, is it's a Class C misdemeanor, like speeding is. Those type of violations, it has to occur in the officer's presence in order for us to take enforcement action, which would mean if using the exit off of 463 coming down on 77 out by Navarro that they were talking about earlier, the officer would actually have to be in the area, witness the jake brake noise, then pull the truck over and issue the citation, for him or her to write the citation.
So he could be working traffic in that area.
Absolutely.
Or parked on the side and hear it or see it.
Yeah, all he or she would have to do is be able to hear it, look, identify that it was coming from that vehicle, and then they could go and make the stop.
Easy enough.
To me, it's not just the enforcement. If you have the signs, people will tend not to do it.
The signs themselves would act as a deterrent
Right.
in general. So you're going to get compliance just by having the signage, but obviously you need the ordinance first to have the signage, so they all kind of work together.
How many complaints have you had?
A lot.
A lot?
And
From
and
the
it's
apartment complexes?
increased a lot because of, there's one particular place where it's a problem, and it's where the Millet signal is.
Yes, sir.
The trucks go up and come down to avoid the signal.
Right.
I myself have gone up and down to avoid the signal. But there are a lot more trucks in town, and it is a much bigger problem than it was in 2013. Much bigger problem.
I think it's a
And-
safety issue also.
It is a safety issue.
I'm not understanding the write-up. The write-up says pursuant to the local government code, section 217.042, the prohibition on the use of an engine brake or retarder is extended to within 5,000 feet outside the limits of the city. I'm reading that to say that's already the law.
Thank you for the question. That's my language, so I'll jump in and help clarify
So
that.
that's not the case. Go ahead.
That section of the local government code allows this type of city regulation to be extended beyond the city limits. Without that section of state law, the city's authority would stop at the city limit line. And so I did not mean to imply in that paragraph that we were extending something that already existed, but rather that we are geographically expanding the area. So perhaps the wording is a little bit misleading, but it did not mean to imply that this regulation was already in effect.
I guess I'm reading this to say that that is already the law, and all we're doing is making it our ordinance, but it's already the law. And that, am I reading that incorrectly, or?
That
Am I-
section of chapter 217 does not specifically refer to making jake brakes illegal. What it does is it says that cities may extend their authority up to 5,000 feet beyond their city limits.
Okay. Okay, so they're not illegal right now.
That's correct. They are not illegal right now. And that reference to state law is only put there to explain why we can regulate outside of our city limits, which normally we cannot do.
Does it need to be in there if we're putting the signs at the city limit sign?
It doesn't, the language does not need to be in there. It's in the recital paragraph. The paragraphs that begin with whereas are above the bold line that begins now therefore be it ordained, and they are merely for background information. If you would like to not extend the prohibition beyond the city limits, then you would remove it from paragraph 1A.
Yeah, and I just don't know how anybody would know about it if they hadn't come across the city limit sign.
Well, that
Does
would
that
be up to us on
necessitate-
on the placement of signs, right? And so we could theoretically place the signs 5,000 feet sooner than the city limit sign. We simply use the city limit sign as a gauge to determine how many entry points exist, not that we would physically put the sign right next to the city limit sign.
Thank you. I was thinking that was very unfriendly. Welcome to Victoria. Engine brakes restricted.
It wouldn't go on the same pole with the city limit sign? This is
No,
all new poles?
it would more than likely be a whole new setup. And I did get a message from staff that they estimate roughly 20 signs if we were to just prioritize TxDOT roadways and some of the major ones coming in.
And where are we getting this from the budget?
We would have to, quite frankly, figure that aspect of it out. We could do one of two things. One, we could see if there are opportunities to absorb the expense with our existing adopted budget. B, do a budget amendment. C, simply incorporate it into fiscal year 22 budget.
Lofgren, do you also get complaints about the loud motorcycles that race on the loop?
Not as much, but I do get complaints about that.
I mean, I hear those more at my house. I don't know why.
I get those complaints every once in a while, but it's mostly about the trucks. I can hear the trucks from my house, and I'm quite a ways from the loop. There's a guy with a motorcycle in my neighborhood that I like to complain about.
So when would this ordinance take effect? This budget year or next budget year?
It would take effect 10 days after the second and third reading of the ordinance. So the second and third reading of the ordinance would be the first meeting in May. I believe that's May 4th. And then 10 days after that, the ordinance would become effective.
The area Mr. Lofgren's talking about is highly populated with apartment complexes. I can see that. There's probably more than 4 large apartment complexes there, so I can see the complaints. I mean,
I just don't want to set the expectation if we adopt this ordinance that it's going to necessarily solve the issue. Only because the motorcycles that I hear racing along the loop, it's the same thing as speeding, and unless there's an officer close by or witnesses it, it doesn't get addressed. And I wouldn't expect jake brakes to be a high priority for our police department.
Well, I wouldn't expect it to solve the problem either, but if it makes the problem less, it's like it's like speed limit signs. They don't necessarily solve the problem, but they do make the problem less. And this problem needs to be less.
I understand from a deterrent standpoint.
Right.
I'm okay with it. I don't want anybody to think that it's going to go away.
No, it's not a magic bullet.
Right, no, I think from a deterrent standpoint, and if we have to have the ordinance in order to have the signs, then it makes sense. I was thinking that it was already in state law, and I didn't see why we had to have the duplication. But you have to have one to get to the attempted.
So despite it becoming an ordinance after second and third read 10 days, it really doesn't become applicable until signage is up.
It would be applicable, but I would not suggest enforcement. It would probably not be enforceable.
Correct, thank you.
Unless it was in state law.
Mayor Pro Tem, reminder that this is a
Yes,
public
I
hearing.
just remembered. I was reading. Now we're going to have a public hearing over this issue. If anybody would like to speak to us, and James, is there anyone up there that might want to talk to us? Come on over. I'm sorry,
Good evening, council and Mayor Pro Tem. A very interesting discussion. I live at the corner of Champions Row and Kelly Drive. So the motorcycle is a whole different subject, but I can speak on that too, but that's not the intent tonight. My wife and I have lived there since leap year February of 1995. It was a very, very quiet neighborhood for a long time. We were there before the loop was built. I guess it was in the planning stage. And it's been quiet until the last couple years, okay? We have a lot of traffic that now, like Mark said, is coming down the Cuero Highway. They get on the feeder, they get on Zach Lentz Parkway to avoid the light at Millette Drive, and they come flying off that ramp. I agree that the signs may not, it is a deterrence, it's a warning, but we have to have the enforcement of that if we're going to make it happen. We really haven't had any issues with this, like say, until the last couple years, but it's increased very dramatically. If I sit on my patio and I get a phone call or someone's talking to me, I basically have to go in the house to finish the call, because when they do this, it is so loud. Mark hears it at his house, okay? And it just, until they get to that light and stop, you cannot hear. And it's you know, if you're in the street talking to a neighbor, you can't do it. You just can't continue that conversation. Noise is an environmental issue. We need to be sensitive to it. Unfortunately, I sit and I observe these people quite frequently because I'm retired and I don't have anything else to do, okay? But you can see a pattern there at the times of the day that it happens. I can tell you about 8:30 in the morning, about 10:30, because I know where the trucks are coming from. They're hauling materials, they're doing work, they're doing, you know, they have jobs. And it's not all of them. It's never everybody doing this, but you have a few that really abuse the system. So, this is the first time I've lived here since '84 that I've asked the councilman to do anything, and I'm very impressed. I want to thank Mark for moving this forward. I think he's had discussions with the city manager, and immediately to me, within 2 months in a bureaucracy is a pretty good thing, okay? So I want to thank Mark and whoever has been involved in this for at least bringing it to this level this quick. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I move we adopt C1.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. No, I'm sorry, I was supposed to say we close public, okay, we already voted. Okay.
Closed by
consent-
default.
Uh-huh. We have a long meeting, so. April, can you please read the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am. Item D1 is the adoption of the minutes of March 26th and April 6th. Item D2 is a resolution approving a contract amendment to the John D. Mercer and Associates for engineering services related to the installation of generators at the police station and community center. Item D3 is a resolution approving assignment of ownership from Power Secure Generators to CPGS Holdings LLC for generators located at Water Plant Number 3 and the Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. Item D4 is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Gary Middleton for representation and consultation services related to municipal water supply in the amount of $24,000. And item D5 is a resolution awarding a contract to Mars Company for the purchase, installation, and training for a 4-station meter test bench in the amount of $86,967.
Move we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, action items for council's discussion. April, can you please read the action items, E1?
Yes, ma'am. Item E1 is a resolution awarding the North Heights Utility Replacement Project Phase 7, which is East Nueces Street, to J&R Contracting of Victoria, Texas for their low proposal of $1,069,850.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm going to start off the presentation for North Heights Utility Replacement. We're going to go over the procurement method, and then I'll pass it over to Ken for the project overview and moving forward. The procurement method we used for this solicitation was the competitively sealed proposal under 2269. With this method, we were able to solicit based on weighted criteria, so we could rank offers, negotiate a price in order to get the best value for the city. The weighted criteria categories were price, schedule, past performance, available resources, overall qualifications, corporate stability and history, as well as references. We received 3 proposals. They were from J&R Contracting Services, Mercer Construction, and Lester Contracting. The proposals were submitted based on, by line item. Once we received the proposals, we evaluated them by the committee. Committee members included Ken Gill, Daryl Seibert, Mike Petro, Todd Jerish, and myself. We then selected the proposal that offered the best value to the city. That came from J&R Contracting Services, Inc. We negotiated with them any possible areas for reduction. There were none, so the final negotiated price was $1,069,850. Are there any questions as far as the procurement method? If not, I'm going to go ahead and pass the rest over to Ken. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. This is the last phase of North Heights for the utilities, Phase 7.
Yay.
Yes, yay. It's been a long 7 years, but it's been a really great project. This one is to replace 8-inch water line and 12-inch water line with new PVC, replace the old clay and concrete with 8-inch and 12-inch PVC, new meter boxes as well as private meter cutoffs behind the meters, and project time estimated at 365 days. Again, it completes all the phases for the utilities. This is a project map, and it's Nueces running from Lentz to Navarro. We will coordinate with DTAR Hospital. We've been in contact with John Wallace. He knows it's coming, and we will continue to coordinate with his emergency vehicles and patrons of DTAR. Additional information, this is again last phase. We'll begin this final phase of the street in summer of '22, and the total cost including this for the utilities was $7 million. And I'll answer any questions.
Mr. Gill, when's the beginning of the construction beginning of the median that TxDOT's gonna be doing on Rio Grande right in that area?
I believe that'll happen, I'm foreseeing that to begin next year sometime.
So where would y'all be at, or we be at in the construction?
We'll be right in there with them on the utility portion. But in the utility portion, we will close a block at a time. We don't just close the whole street. We will work with the residents in there to keep that street open, because it is, that Nueces of all the streets in that North Heights, that one is the busiest.
And the worst.
And the worst, that's true.
So it's gonna complicate the flow of traffic with that, the TxDOT putting that.
For this short time, I believe so. I think one thing we want to encourage is to keep Goldman open, because that's one of TxDOT's openings. That will again facilitate that area getting into North Heights off of Business 59, and again facilitate DTAR.
For perspective, how much did it cost in year 1 to do the utilities?
Actually, it was probably a little bit less, maybe 8 to 900,000, but not much difference. It stayed pretty consistent. We've had, in these last few phases, we've had some really good prices from the contractors. We've added a contractor during these 7 years to our list. For a long time, it was Mercer, Lester, and that was kind of it. And, well, Falcon was in there. Now we've added J&R, so we've actually got 4 utility contractors.
This came under your projected amount, right?
Yes, it did.
Good job.
In-house design.
Oh.
I move we adopt item E2.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Thank you.
And I forgot a time slide, so I'll just go this real quick.
Okay.
Execute contract in May.
Just really quickly, point of clarification. Motion was made for E2, but it's E1.
I'm sorry, E1, yes. What did I say?
E2.
I'll take that.
I'm trying to move this meeting along.
I was going to say, I'll take that.
I just heard move to adopt.
So just want to make
So,
sure
yes,
that.
I want to make sure and clarify that that was for E1, my
Okay.
motion.
We don't have to revote, do we?
Not unless any council member objects.
Anybody object? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, after it's passed, I'll hit the timeline real quick. Execute the contract in May, mobilize in June.
Didn't you hear Jeff? He's trying to move it along.
I'm moving this along, I'm going quick. April to finish the phase of phase 6 of the street, and then this project complete in June. We'll continue to bid the projects with competitive sealed proposals, negotiate, and evaluate to select the best contractor. Thank you. Now we can move to E2.
Okay. April?
Item E2 is a resolution approving an advanced funding agreement with TxDOT for Loop 463 ramp relocation project in the amount of $816,087.19.
Okay, as you'll remember, this is part of the property commerce agreement of talking and getting that development near Home Depot. Kind of a background, in July of 2020, Property Commerce requested assistance to relocate the ramp. What they want to do is scoot it back east to give them an extra driveway to get into their proposed development. November of 2020, we approved the funding in the amount of $816,000 and change for the relocation of the exit ramp. Then in 2021, approved the funding for the construction of the exit ramp. Those two are the same. And then in 2021, Property Commerce entered into the agreement for the design and surveying with Civil Corps. January of 21, ramp relocation design begins, and here we are looking at the preparation for the advanced funding agreement between us and TxDOT. This is a rendering of the ramp relocation. As you can see, the exit ramp is moving to the east. Again, it gives that access to the properties, and that's a better picture of it. One thing I want to point out, that during this construction, the exit ramp will be, they can build the new exit ramp without disturbing the current ramp as it is. They won't have to shut either one down during that time. I think that was a critical point during the process of the construction and design. And the project timeline, I'll start out with April 16th, where 90 submittal to TxDOT. That's already happened. The 20th resolution to execute the AFA that's presented to you. May 8th, they're expecting 100% design submittal to TxDOT. July 21st, we submit the payment to TxDOT if this is approved, and that must be 60 days prior to the letting, which is expected in October. January, begin construction, and in summer 2022, complete the construction. And this was all discussed with Property Commerce, and they're in agreement with this AFA.
Would you go back a slide? Is the new exit is going to be a little bit shorter than the current exit? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Because the current one is.
The current one is
seems
really long.
Yeah.
And they're scooting it back and making it shorter, which again, will bring that access point further east to their property. And I believe one of the things we talked about was increasing the lighting, because I know that was a concern from Mayor McCoy at the time, and we want to increase the lighting for that exit ramp so it's more visible when you're coming down the loop.
And is there like a third lane that somebody could get on? Because, looking at her comment, it does seem a little short, but if you can get that third lane to start getting off?
No, they're gonna, we talked about that during the conception.
Mm-hmm.
This slide is actually not correct. They are not gonna have 3 lanes when you come off, because there's no way you can skip 3 lanes to get over. They're gonna eliminate that 1/3 lane. As you exit, it's just gonna exit into the 2 lanes. Does that make sense?
I wish you had a better picture.
It's just going to be a regular exit.
Instead of the section where it's got 3 arrows, it's only gonna have 2. They're not going to add that extra third lane. It's because you won't be able to get over fast enough to get to access their property.
No, I'm talking getting off.
Beginning of the ramp,
Beginning of the ramp.
widening the loop to accommodate a third lane.
It will be. I mean, they're
Okay.
going to I don't think they're going to widen the loop there. They'll just build into that ramp off of that 2 lanes, just pretty much like it is now.
It's just that, it seems like you got a whole lot more, but it's still the same amount of time to get off.
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay, I understand now.
Ken, will that frontage road be closed during some of that construction?
They will have to close a lane possibly, but they're not planning on closing the frontage road.
Okay.
Because that's the entrance to the subdivision is right there.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I thought there was a difference in the amount. I've seen $1 million mentioned before. Could somebody clarify that for me?
Sure, so procedurally, what happens after the design is submitted to TxDOT, TxDOT goes out and bids the project. It's unclear what the final cost of the project will be, and we'll get that figure when it gets out for bid. It is possible that once the bid goes out, that the price will be higher than what is in the AFA. But all parties involved have agreed to honor the amount of the AFA as agreed upon originally. And all parties agreed to have a conversation about any variations in the expense after the official bidding of the project, so that at least the conversation can take place based off of factual numbers and not simply just assumptions.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And to add a positive note to that, we would even negotiate if the project bid less than 816, that would be money coming back.
Great.
So either way, we would have to have this money to them in 60 days after, they let the project.
60 days prior to
Prior
the
to,
letting.
okay, so that would be 60 days prior, we would give them the money whether it's higher or lower, or are we gonna stick to the 816?
Again, it's the 816 is estimated cost. Once it's bid, then we square up then if it's a substantial amount. Then at the final completion of the project, then all the numbers are put together and it's either a plus in our pocket or a plus in their pocket. But there's going to be 2 times possibly where we have to add additional funding for this project or get money back.
And I'm not sure if Ken hit on it, but just for the sake of clarification, this project is being funded by the Sales Tax Development Corporation and was budgeted for to the amount that is before you tonight in the budget. And so no budget amendment is needed for the AFA that's before you tonight. If amounts do change, then that'll just be a conversation we would have to have with Sales Tax Development Corporation first, and then ultimately, obviously, with council, if it's warranted.
It would still come back to us before any final decision, right? For any amendments?
Correct. Typically,
Okay.
yes, budget amendments of Sales Tax Development Corporation typically end up coming to council for final approval.
Okay, that's fine.
But on the unlikely event that nothing changes, is this the last time we see this? Or does this-
Correct.
Should be,
Yeah.
yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I move we adopt item E2.
I second it.
Again.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. E3,
Item E3 is a resolution approving amendment to the professional services agreement with Freese Nichols for engineering design services for the Ben Wilson Corridor Improvements Project in the amount of $130,450.
Okay, last item for me. This item basically has 2 components to the amendment. One is to increase the clock tower height from its original basis of 25 to 30 feet to 45 to 50 feet. And then an additional item to tie in the patio of the STEM building that's out there, and a little bit of contingency included in that item. This is a presentation put on by Nick with Freese Nichols, And I'll go through it real quick. He is on the line just in case there's really some technical questions. This is a strip map. This is Airline intersection, and we're going to be going south. This didn't change in the concept any. It's still a 3-lane section. And as you see, as you're coming up to Airline, there's a right turn only and then a straight through and a left turn. It has got the landscaping, of course, on both sides with the sidewalks pulled away from the street. Next slide, as we get closer to the campus entrance, this is right there where the soccer fields and Brownson Terrace meet. This is the slide where the clock tower is. It's right in front of the student center and then right in front of the entrance to the administration building. And we'll keep going down. And this is as it meets into Red River. Here's what we had, the clock comparison, some pictures of it. The picture on the left was the current tower height of what they recommended. The next picture is the proposed tower height, which shows it higher. It's the same configuration, same brick style. It's got some red facing on it on one side. One of the things that I heard from Matt Alexander with UHV, they are looking at the top. You'll notice a slanted type roof, which is a solar panel. Dr. Glenn wants to change that to a more aesthetically type pleasing appearance, so that may change. One of the things that I want to bring out is as you're driving down Ben Wilson, the two faces you see on the north and south of Ben Wilson, those are static, basically signs or message, UHV signs. Basically, it's announcing this is UHV. The signs or the faces that will face the campus of the student center, and the other ones will be an LED type message board to give students messages of what's happening on campus, but those will be away from the traffic. So as you're driving, you will not see messages changing at you all the time. I wanted to make that point because that was a clear point I asked Nick about which sides, changing.
Would you say that again? Because I'm only seeing 4 sides and I see a clock on 2 of them.
The clock is the one they want to change to an LED type message board. So it wouldn't be a clock on that side, and that's the side that's going to face the student center and face the administration, not traffic.
I'm not sure if the clock tower will have a clock.
That's correct.
Okay.
I think it's going away from a clock tower, correct.
But the others going north and south are static.
Those are static UHV.
Meaning they put it up there and it never changes. It's not digital.
It might have the time on the bottom right of the screen. I'm not sure, I'm just joking, but.
It could be digital.
They're still working on a design, but the sign, the facing that you're going to be driving is basically what you're showing there, UHV.
Okay.
And we don't want that because we want the drivers to stay focused on the road, not on a sign changing. Again, this is another picture showing the height differences. And this is the campus entry marker. They've done some revisions to this to make it a little bit more visible. One thing that they are working on with their architectural board is trying to keep as you'll notice, the brick color that is consistent with what's on campus. They're really striving to unify their architectural with the street and within their campus. This is the STEM building coordination, patio ground level, and then STEM build aerial perspective. I don't know that they've gotten much farther on that, so that's coming. And if James could press the go button, this will be a fly-through video with the tower at its 45 to 50-foot height. And that's it for the video. One thing to keep in mind is for the public, you're seeing all the landscape. This is landscape after it's grown. It's not going to be planted at this full height. These are mature trees. So it's going to take some time for the landscaping to really take effect and to show this much, aesthetics, and for Daryl to maintain, not. It's gonna be UHVs. There it went, one more time. Okay, date, 6 weeks. I want to go over this real quick. These are weeks. I'd rather give a time frame. I think that's more applicable. Advertising, we're looking at September, October of this year. Bids, November, to go out for bid, open the bids. Award it, I'm anticipating December. And we'd like to the beginning would be January, February, good time of the year, gets through the holidays, and it starts off fresh. And then a 12-month project. And if there are any questions or go back over, I'll be glad to answer them.
I have a question. I remember somebody saying that they were going to put a fence starting from, where the Bon Air or the houses start all the way to the intersection of Airline to make it uniform. Are they still planning on doing that?
Right now, that's not considered, that's not right in the project now. There
Okay.
are contingency funds, and that is one of the issues we've talked to UHV about. They do want it. It's just they're worried about the project right now is meeting their project funding amount, but it's still being discussed as a possible contingency item that we can add as this project moves. We want to put that in as a project additive.
Yeah, bid alternate. So we can get a price on it. And there's a couple of other items too that would make the bid alternate list that, if all goes as planned, would still be done out of the contingency funds. But there's a reluctance on everybody's part, to reduce the contingency funds, before you even start the project. And so we're optimistic and hopeful that the vision for the project is able to be done with the funds that have been allocated, regardless of, what we bid primary versus alternate.
And they are going to redo the whole street, pull it up and then put it down?
That's correct. And take care of the drainage, improve the drainage and the utilities.
Okay.
So it's not a mill and overlay anymore?
No.
Okay. Other question I have, this is a item to add where's the number? I just had it. 130,450 to the contract, but that gets directly reimbursed by UHV to the city.
That's correct. Okay. This is going to be paid by UHV, and they're in support of this, of course.
Yep.
I have a question about the height of the clock tower, non-clock tower. I've been in favor of this project from the start. I don't think that's a secret. But I'm also not in favor of 50-foot tall signs. And I'm just wondering how committed they are to that. I didn't realize that the initial picture was 25 to 30 feet because most of our on-premises signs are 35 feet. So I've been driving around looking at the height of various things versus 45 to 50. And I'm not sure that I should be micromanaging it, but I would be more comfortable in the 30 to 40 range than 45 to 50. And I don't know how everybody else feels or if that doesn't matter.
I believe one of the reasons that they went up a little higher was they wanted to make sure that as that landscaping and the trees matured, that sign would be visible from a distance, such as from Red River Airline. And I believe that's one of the reasons they went up higher. Now, I understand, yes, there is some, on our signboard, but this was kind of a separate agreement because it was an interlocal agreement with us and University of Houston. I don't know that the even sign was discussed at the height of it. So it's still conceptual, and you're correct in that manner. But I wanted to give a reason why they went up.
The other reason is that it matches the heights of the buildings across the street, so it's uniform.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, was the height of the buildings on both sides of the street. Do we know that?
I don't know what let me look, let me see if they got a good picture of it.
Well, it's close to
It's
one
pretty
building,
close.
but on the other side,
close.
there's a big parking lot. So,
It's pretty
Yeah,
close.
if it's 4 stories, that's 45 feet.
I was going to actually mention that I thought it was a nice focal point from an aesthetic standpoint, so.
I like it too.
I'm glad I brought it up so we could discuss it.
I move we accept item E3.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Item E4?
Item E4 is an ordinance amending Section 14-52B of the City Code related to an itinerant vendor permits, and this item is on its second and third reading.
Good evening, everybody. I have here a brief presentation on the itinerant vendors permit and the proposed change in the ordinance. So moving right along, the one item that I'm looking to add into this itinerant vendors permit, section 14-52B, is what you see highlighted there in red. So it reads, itinerant vendor permits are not required for sales by authorized vendors at boot fests and events organized or co-sponsored by the Parks and Recreation Department or by the Victoria Main Street Program, or to the sales occurring in Riverside Park, De Leon Plaza, Community Center Park, Ethel E. Tracy Park, as long as the vendor is occupying that area in compliance with the written authorization of the Director of Parks and Recreation or its designee. And it goes further on into more details of the permit requirements. So that is the only proposed change in the ordinance that we're looking at for tonight. Just to give you some context and some background information on the Market on Main event that is hosted by Main Street Program. It currently takes place in the parking lot behind the Box Coffee, 200 South Main. This event is held closer to the restaurants versus De Leon Plaza to help the local businesses profit on a weekend. Currently, we have the 3 restaurants and the 1 retail space nearby. Actually, 4 restaurants and 2 more retail businesses nearby. And each artisan vendor must fill out an application, pay $20, and adhere to the Market on Main guidelines to participate. It is for only items that are handmade, trying to promote the artisans in the local area. And the event is helped to activate the downtown and drive more visitors to the area, which has done so. Facades and the Market on Main on March opened for the first time on Saturday for 13 years. That's the first time they were open on a Saturday for 13 years on the March Market. Some additional information, going into a little bit more details, is what is required of the permit. If any vendor artisan intends to sell products outside the designated areas listed in the ordinance or at an event not co-sponsored by the Parks and Recreation Department or the Victoria Main Street Program, if this passes, they must file for the itinerant vendor permit. If any vendor artisan intends to sell outside of the designated areas listed in the ordinance but are co-sponsored by Parks and Rec or the Main Street Program, the itinerant vendor permit is not required. If the vendor is required to obtain an itinerant vendor permit, each person working in each booth would have to have a background check through Identico, which is the company that performs the background checks, and pay the $80 permit fee to the City of Victoria. Once the permit is obtained, it is good for 6 months. On average, there are a total of 15 to 20 vendors at the Market on Main, and this event is scheduled to be held 6 times out of the year. And just for some background information on some of the designated areas, there were a total of 31 private public facilitated events held in 2019, 7 at De Leon Plaza, 9 at Riverside Park, and 2 at Ethel E. Tracy that all had vendors present. As far as next steps, city staff will be reviewing our policies and practices internally for city-related sponsored events. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
I noticed there was a festival or something going on at De Leon Plaza today.
Yes.
Do they require itinerant vendors?
No, because it is in the designated area.
But it's not co-sponsored by the Parks Department or Victoria Main Street Program?
Correct.
But just because it's in De Leon Plaza, it's okay?
Yes, according to the ordinance.
Yes, sir, that is the correct reading of the ordinance.
And why is that So that any vendor that can go into De Leon Plaza or Riverside Park, it says though it has to have approval by the Parks Department, doesn't it?
Correct.
So what type of compliance is there that's included in this written authorization?
So not, if you mean for the event organizer, there would be no compliance as it relates to this type of permit, right? If they're having it at De Leon Plaza, this ordinance just doesn't touch them at all. And so if it's a city-sponsored event like Danielle's or Boot Fest, we have a very specific process to vet vendors, not through the extent that the traditional method applies. But if it's a third-party event organizer like the one today, we're not involved with that at all. So we are not involved with the vendor selection process, application process. We're not involved in that at all. And so when we mention on here that we want to review our policies related to city-sponsored events, and even just city facilities, quite frankly, is because we recognize that there's an opportunity to strengthen the public safety aspect of events. And so, for example, currently, the only trigger in our event requirements that triggers, for example, that an event organizer hire an off-duty police officer is if they sell alcohol. And that's it. There might be opportunities to add language that creates other scenarios where we require the event organizer to do the same. We also know that whenever you have a high volume of people, there's also likely, especially during the summer and things of that sort, where you might have paramedics responding. So it's also becoming more common to have triggers that also require paramedics to be hired by event organizers to be on standby in case anything happens. And so we recognize that there are opportunities there, and so that's what we mean when we say that we'll review our policies and practices to try and just ensure that some of these events that we don't have as much control over at least are able to and required to have certain public safety personnel present.
So what we're saying in this ordinance is we don't care what event you're hosting or bringing in or what vendors you're bringing in, as long as you do it at De Leon Plaza or Riverside Park or Ethel Lee Tracy Park in our public arenas. Bring whoever you want in.
Yeah, in a way, yes. I mean, there are obviously some elements that, wouldn't necessarily be allowed probably, but yes, in theory, yes, you're describing it correctly.
Why not?
Why not what?
Why wouldn't, anybody could come in and do a vendor booth.
Do they have
Correct, yeah, and I'm agreeing with your sentiment, but your original comment was, that anybody could come in and, and do it kind of on a whim. And so that the reason why I hesitate is because people can't do it on a whim, right? I mean, they still have to get a permit. They still have to fill out paperwork with staff. If they plan out on closing a street, the police chief actually has the sole authority to determine whether the police department grants closing a street or not. And so it's not just on a whim. People can show up and, and do whatever they want per se. There's still somewhat of a process. It's just not going through this process that requires background checks and paying a fee and things of that sort.
So like they reserve the park or something like that?
Correct. So for example,
I can explain.
Here's
the
our
process.
parks expert. Why am I talking?
So anytime somebody's going to reserve one of the spaces like De Leon Plaza or Ethel Lee Tracy for a special event, there is what is called a special event consultation that takes place at the Parks Department. And there is a very detailed application that they have to fill out prior to putting down a deposit to reserve the space, and then they have to come in and sit in with staff and actually go through the entire event in detail on what they plan on having in that space. And then at that time, that's when staff can make changes or suggestions to their event.
You're talking about the event organizer. Now, he has the ability to bring in vendors. Do you do background checks on those vendors, not necessarily just the event organizer?
Currently, that does not take place as part of that event
Is this
consultation.
ordinance going to allow you to do that or not?
No, the existing ordinance actually exempts vendors that participate in events at De Leon Plaza, Riverside Park, other city facilities from having to go through this process that includes background checks. And so there's one part of the ordinance that's based off of place, which is De Leon Plaza, Riverside Park, and then there's a part of the ordinance that hits on sponsorship, because theoretically, the Parks Department could have an event, or even Main Street, which is what we are recommending, could have an event in a non-already identified location that would not necessitate going through the process also.
Okay, so right now what we're going to be voting on is just on Main Street.
Correct. Is simply to add Main Street to the list of sponsored events that exempts the vendors from like the market that she just described from going through the process of paying the fee with April's office and going through the background check.
Okay, so I'm asking when or how do we strengthen that to where it would be a requirement that any vendor should have a background check? Because people will fall through the cracks and then we'll have some issues on anywhere inside, any one of our places, whether it be, the De Leon Plaza or the park or, anywhere that we have events, if we have exemptions, then somebody could basically come in and we have no control over that.
Correct. And if the desire of council from a policy standpoint is to change that, I mean, by all means, feel free to suggest that, give us direction so that we can come back accordingly. We are not recommending that, at least not at this point. All we are recommending tonight is simply adding the Main Street program.
Right, but I feel very strongly that we need to have a policy or an ordinance or something to that fact, that, it would require all the vendors. Just because we're sponsoring the event doesn't mean that we know who they're going to bring in.
What kind of liability do we have if a vendor comes and it's a city-sponsored event and somebody has some violations or some safety hazard to the public?
That's a very broad question.
I know.
Thank you.
For a long meeting, I figured
Councilman Bogart
that'd be
said,
good.
it's a long meeting, so I'll try to keep this short. Assuming we're talking about some sort of injury to a person or injury to property resulting from this vendor, the liability on the city would be minimal unless the city was involved in that injury. Assuming we're talking about a contract situation, there is a waiver of sovereign immunity related to contract situations only to the extent that the city might owe that person some money. So there are different avenues where someone could pursue a claim against the city. But the opportunity for a third party to sue the city because of one of the vendors is actually fairly small.
But a possibility.
But a possibility, yes, sir.
And keep in mind too that this just captures vendors, and there's a slew of other individuals that are involved with events, right? Event organizers, performers, when applicable, and so all this ordinance does is hit on vendors, which are the people that sell something. So just keep that in mind. That if we do go down the path of having a conversation about, what if people falling through the cracks, as you mentioned, it'll very quickly turn into something that's much broader than just a vendor.
Right.
I'm with Ms. Solis. I understand what we're doing here now, or I didn't the last time, and I'm fine adding it to this ordinance, but I don't like the ordinance. And I would like to visit it. Maybe we could do it at our next workshop or something. We could actually spend some time talking about it as a council and weigh the pros and the cons.
Absolutely.
I concur. I'm fine with adding Victoria Main Street to this, now that we have all the information, but I think it bears a discussion.
Yeah, I think it probably does. I mean, this is the itinerant vendor permits. And so this is also just door-to-door salespeople. That's what this is really for. And so it then exempted things that the city or the Parks Department allows. We're expanding it to Main Street. But I mean, that's where this is coming from. And so this may not be where we need to address the issue that we have. It may be within the vetting process, the internal vetting process that Parks and Recreation does or Main Street, that we have our issue with more than with this ordinance.
Yeah, I like using this ordinance when they knock on my door and ask to see their permit.
I do the same.
Girl Scouts run.
They're exempt. So are Boy Scouts. Okay, so,
All right, this is an action item.
yes.
Then
we
I
need-
move we adopt.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. Now we have our citizen managers' reports.
Yes, ma'am. City managers' reports. We do have 3 listed on the agenda, but we're actually only going to do 2 this evening. We've made the executive decision to do that because we do have an executive session that we want all of council to be very participatory in. But in any case, first up is an update on the Victoria Independent School District's bond program. We do have Dr. Quentin Shepard, who's the superintendent, and Greg Bonewald, who's his deputy superintendent, with us tonight. As a refresher, this is the city manager's report, so this is not an action item. The goal of this presentation is to help educate obviously everybody listening in, and our residents who might be tuning in on TV or online. And so we hope that today or tonight's conversation is educational for everyone.
So just for clarification, this is not a advocate for or against the bond election.
Correct, and I'm sure that was probably the first thing he was going to say, and so I'll turn it over to Dr. Shepard.
Absolutely. All we're allowed to do is share information, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of months. Mayor Pro Tem Solis, esteemed council members, thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time this evening. I have with me Dr. Bonewald, my deputy, who's going to help give part of this presentation. We've been giving this presentation throughout the community for the last couple of months leading up to this bond question, which stands in front of our community. And ultimately, it's a question our community has asked of itself. We have this presentation, like I said, it takes us about 45 minutes to get through it. City Manager Garza told us we have 10 minutes, so you're all gonna have to listen very fast. In the past 3 years, when I first came to the community 3 years ago, I asked folks a very simple question. What do you love about our school district and what would you have me focus on? To a person, and specific to why we're here tonight, folks said that we recognize that our buildings are in need of repair. We recognize that our buildings are old, and we know that we have to do something about it. But at the same time, we want to have a voice in the process. And I heard that almost to a person, and I took that as my charge. And been on a listening and learning tour, and from that reported back to the community some of the findings that I had heard. You all know that we do these digital exchanges where everybody in the community has an opportunity to have their voice heard and weigh in on the thoughts of others. And we continued that process leading up to our strategic plan, which culminated in this past year. We had tens of thousands of interactions from our community leading up to the strategic plan. And most of the language that you can find in our strategic plan is actually language we harvested from the community itself. It's folks who sat at home and shared their thoughts and feelings. And what came about as part of the strategic planning, of course, is all about learning pathways and educating kids. And we're really excited about some of the learning pathways we have for kids. You've read about the Early Childhood Center, which is going to open up very soon in our community. This will be the first in the state where we have a partnership with UT Austin for early childhood education. We've received about $9 million in grant funding to build STEM programs at elementary school, at middle school, and STEM pathways at high school. We've got Math Innovation Zone elementary schools coming online. We just have a plethora of offerings for our kids in building pathways. But those are all curricular programs, and that $9 million can only be used for the curriculum. It can't be used for the facilities themselves. Part of the strategic planning process from our community also mentioned buildings and talked about the importance of having good buildings for our students. And so from there, we kicked off some more task forces, involved more of our community members in the process, and Dr. Bonewald has led a great deal of that process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to him to talk through that.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Solis, members of the council. It's an honor to be here with you tonight. I'm going to start by both expressing gratitude to you and to the group of citizens who served as a part of a bond planning task force on behalf of VISD in our community for about a year and a half. If we go back to before we knew COVID, in September of 2019, we put out an all call for anyone in the community who would be interested in doing this kind of work. And we had 32 citizens who finished a 1.5-year journey with us. 21 of those parents and community members, 11 staff ranging from teachers to principals, members of our child nutrition department, custodial, transportation, and maintenance. We were really trying to get a cross-section of our entire community. This group spent about 40 hours over the course of 16 meetings over the course of 16 months. What you see here on the presentation is the type of information they reviewed. And as I walk through it very briefly, you can see why it took a while. They looked at our district's financial overview. They looked at enrollment projections for VISD for the next decade, analyzed our current campus capacities and usages. They took physical tours pre-COVID to some of our oldest and some of our newest buildings to look at the discrepancies and differences in learning environments. We hired Huckabee Architects to come in as a third party to do a comprehensive facility assessment of 21 of our oldest facilities. The task force reviewed the strategic planning findings and directions that Dr. Shepard just mentioned and considered the innovative coursework that's coming online across several of our elementary and middle schools. I tell everyone one of the biggest eye-openers for me in this process, and I think I can speak for the task force members, was when we got to reviewing construction cost data, looking at what it actually costs to build elementaries and middle schools and how that cost rises annually. The task force went through case studies. They looked at other school districts who have taken older facilities and either renovated those or built new facilities in their place. And they did a cost-benefit analysis of that as a part of this process. They also looked at our district's bonding capacity and the tax rate impact to our community. They considered multiple scenarios as a part of this process. Dr. Shepard brought Thought Exchange to us 3 years ago. I hope you've heard about it. We've done a multitude of thought exchanges, gathering feedback from students, parents, staff, and community as a part of this process. And this community task force reviewed that data as well as a community survey. Through this process, we had some great questions that came forward from our community on the task force, and also as we were getting media coverage about the work of the bond planning task force from our community at large. One of the questions that we most regularly received was, how does the district currently use resources to maintain the facilities that we have? And so part of that, this data that you're going to see here was put together to address that question. We start with this small pie graph here, which is representative of a school district, our school district's annual revenues and where that money goes. 81% of annual revenues go to paying staff, pay and benefits. And that may look large when you first look at that. We studied that compared to school districts in Texas, large and small. On average, 80% of revenues go to pay staff. Education is a people-heavy business. What that also means is that everything else that we do in a given year as a school district comes from that other 19% of the pie. And so this larger pie graph is breaking that 19% down. Where does that money go? The largest piece of the pie goes where the average citizen that I talk to tells me they think it should go, which is to instruction, to teaching kids. What I think many are surprised to find is that the second largest piece of the pie, and almost as large at 29%, goes to maintaining our facilities. You may have heard that, is the school district using resources to try to maintain what we already have? And the data shows us, yes, we're spending millions of dollars a year working on maintaining our many facilities. We took that information and wanted to add context to it. We have peer districts. Districts that serve a similar number of students, somewhere in the 13,000 to 14,000 range, and operate a similar number of facilities. And we looked at what percentage of our expenses goes toward facility maintenance and operations. Are we spending a lower amount? What we find in comparing to peer districts is that we are actually spending above average on an annual basis on facility maintenance and operations. The largest member on that group, Wichita Falls ISD, who spends a higher percentage, in November passed a $280 million bond to address their aging infrastructure. Another common question that we were receiving was around our tax rate, the school district's tax rate. We were asked questions about what's the history of the tax rate, and it feels like, or it seems that the tax rate rises every year for the school district. So we mapped it out, going back to 2000. In 2000, the VISD total tax rate was $1.47. This map, or this graph, shows the past 21 years. In 2021, we're at the lowest rate in the last 21 years at just under $1.19. You'd actually have to go back to 1992 before you got to a year when the VISD total tax rate was lower than it is currently, 29 years ago. We were also asked questions about how our school district's tax rate compares to similar sized school districts and school districts in our area. And what we found in that, and this is a graph of similar, or school districts in our area, basically every road leading out of Victoria in every direction. We're not the lowest, and we're certainly nowhere near the highest, and we're below the average tax rate for area school districts. In thought of time, we didn't bring the chart comparing us to similar size school districts, but we are also below average in terms of comparison to similar size school districts as well. Another common question that we received was about debt that the school district has, and how does that compare to other school districts, and what does that look like? So this comes from TEA, and their most recent statistics comparing us to other districts are from 2019. But at that time, debt per student in Victoria ISD was $8,854. That next bar graph you see there is for Region 3. That's the region of the state that we're in as an educator, as an education system. We're about half of the Region 3 average. And then when you compare us to the state average, you can see that's nearing $20,000 per student in debt. VISD does have debt associated with prior bonds. In context, we're not a debt-heavy school district compared to other school districts. There's another way other than debt per student that school districts analyze debt, and it's principal and interest debt versus district tax base or property values in that school district. You can see here a comparison to peer districts, similar size, operating a similar number of facilities, and the debt ratio those school districts carry. Victoria ISD is fourth from the left. They're at 2.68%, based on the most recent year that we have comparison data. The average for these peer districts was approximately 8%. VISD is about a third of the debt ratio for school districts similar to VISD. One of the questions that's very appropriate for a community to wrestle with, and I saw our task force wrestle with, and you could actually watch them wrestle with this on the virtual meetings, over 20 hours of them that are available to our community. They wrestled with, when is the right time? When is the right time to have a bond election? When is the right time to have that conversation with your community? And I saw our school board discuss this after the task force made the recommendation. One of the data points that they discussed around that question was around bond interest rates and consideration of the fact that bond interest rates are near historic lows and what that means for a school district and a community that approves a bond election. And what we found that it means is that more of your money can go toward the actual work associated with improving the school district. Less of the money goes toward paying interest associated with the debt. And so that was a data point that I saw the task force and our board discuss and wrestle with. Now, the bond proposal itself, early voting started on Monday. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. But what it entails, one is district-wide priority repairs across over 20 facilities in the school district. The second item is building a new Strowman Middle School, not renovating the current facility, but building a new Strowman Middle School. Strowman was prioritized by this task force, considering all of the campuses in the VISD, not because it's the oldest, it's not our oldest building. It is regularly our most expensive to maintain. It was prioritized because of its condition, and it was prioritized because starting next year, it will be our STEM middle school, science, technology, engineering, and math-based middle school. Mission Valley Elementary was also recommended by the task force for rebuild, building a new campus. Mission Valley was prioritized because of its age and condition. Mission Valley is our oldest campus in the district. The core facilities are 84 years old. Another portion of the campus is portable buildings that have been utilized as classrooms for over 3 decades. A typical portable building is expected to be used a lifespan of about 20 years. The final part of the bond planning task force recommendation is representative of about 1% of the overall portion of the bond, but I've heard more than 1% of the conversation as I've been out there talking with our community about playgrounds. This was something that the parents and community members on the task force brought to our district and said, you know, across our elementary campuses, we see a discrepancy in the accessibility for all students to be able to utilize and equity in terms of what's available for students to utilize on these playgrounds. And what I was hearing from them was they want to see an equitable and an accessible opportunity for students to play regardless of where they live in the school district. Another common thing that we hear as we're sharing this out with our community, and I shared it with you earlier, was around construction cost data. And wow, these numbers are so big. Absolutely, they feel big. I've heard you discuss big numbers today. You're probably used to that, but many on our task force were not. I think it's important to clarify that these numbers are not simply raw construction cost numbers. You see an asterisk there at the bottom. Those are project budgets that include estimated costs to furnish, provide fixtures, equipment such as technology, permits, fees, contingency fees associated with building, and then escalation. On average, it takes 2 years to design and build an elementary, and it takes about 3 years to design and build a middle school. And so we recognize construction costs rise 4 to 8% a year in school construction. And so depending on current square footage costs would not be relevant to where we expect to be at the time that these buildings would actually be built. Now, I mentioned district-wide priority repairs. It's across 22 facilities in the school district and addressing replacement of end-of-life infrastructure, safety and security systems, HVACs, roofing, plumbing, electrical, gas lines, windows, building envelope, kitchen expansions at a few of our campuses. We have elementaries that were built 5, 6 decades ago and then added on over time, wings, adding enrollment, but not expanding the ability to serve that number of students. So there's a few kitchen enhancements and then paving in a few locations across the district. Mentioned Strowman Middle School is the middle school identified for rebuild. Here are some current pictures of Strowman Middle School infrastructure. These were taken as part of the facility assessment. The new Strowman Middle School, should the bond be approved, would be built for a capacity of 1,200 students. Currently, Strowman serves about 900 students in a non-COVID year. We recognize that a part of this STEM grant that we've received and this STEM pathway is to provide that opportunity to families across our district, not simply to families who happen to live in the Strowman zone. And so students and families who would like to attend a STEM-based education curriculum that are currently at Cade or Howell or Patty Welder Middle Schools would have the opportunity to be considered to attend Strowman and the STEM Academy. Here's a few pictures of the existing infrastructure at Mission Valley Elementary. Again, Mission Valley core facility, 84 years old. Mission Valley is planned to be designed for 400 students. Currently, Mission Valley can serve about 250. They've squeezed in a few more in some years. We regularly send students to other campuses who live in the Mission Valley area because their grade levels will simply run out of that student-to-teacher ratio and they can't attend there. We had a demographic study done last year when we rezoned some of our boundaries for our campuses, and that demographic study showed us what we, I think, know as Victoria citizens, that Our city's growing in that direction. It's growing in the northwest direction. And so this would provide capacity for 400 students, which would be ample capacity for what's projected in the coming years as that area grows gradually. And then I mentioned the new playgrounds across each of our elementaries, providing access for all students, including students with disabilities. Common question we receive is what would be the impact to the taxpayer, to you and me as homeowners in the district? If the bond is approved, the interest in sinking portion or INS part of the school district's tax rate would rise by 7.5 cents. That would equate to a $6.25 per month increase per $100,000 of home value. I've highlighted that third column from the bottom. We reached out to the Victoria County Appraisal District in this process to get the average home value, and it's a little over $168,000 is what we were told. And so we calculated that for the average home value, that estimated monthly impact would be $10.50. And then below there, you can see the estimated monthly impact for a $200,000 or a $300,000 home. But ultimately, it's $6.25 a month per $100,000 of value. Now, there is one exception in Texas law. If you are a resident who is 65 and above and you have filled out your homestead exemption, then your school taxes are frozen. They do not rise with the passage of a bond election by a school district that increases the tax rate. And so the tax impacts that I just shared with you on the previous slide would not apply to our Victoria residents who are 65 or older and have filed their homestead exemption. Their taxes would remain the same. They're considered to be frozen. I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to come and share this information. There's a whole lot more where this came from. Our website is just, you could spend days on it. And in fact, you could watch 20 hours of this community task force wrestling with decisions much like I've watched you wrestle with tonight. It's really interesting stuff. But we just appreciate the chance, the time that you've given us, and we'd be happy to provide any additional information or answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
It was very good.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So I'm actually going to allow Gilbert to introduce the next city manager report. Okay, or Wesley. Wesley, you going to pass it on to somebody else?
No, he did the work, so.
You're passing the buck.
Okay.
Ken's ready.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Tonight we'll be presenting a report on the audit of the city's financial statements for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020. The audit was performed by Harrison, Waldrop, and Uherrick. The report's been posted to the website and distributed to all the appropriate agencies to comply with all filing requirements. And tonight we have Steve Van Manen here with HWU, who is going to give us an overview of the audit process and provide some financial highlights found within the report.
Thank you, Wesley. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Mr. Garza made a comment earlier about the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. The title of the report is a comprehensive annual financial report, 250 plus pages. The requirement to meet governmental reporting standards stop at page 100. So staff has gone beyond what is required to be presented to the public. 38 years of receiving the award is a very significant achievement for the city. The first thing I'd like to direct your attention to is the auditor's opinion. This is really the summation of our work regarding the audit. And on page 2, of the opinion, the top paragraph, it states, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. Now, this is what's referred to as the unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. From a CPA's perspective, I can't give the council any greater assurance than this form of opinion that these financial statements are accurate. It's the same type of opinion that the council has received for many years. That's the other types of opinions you don't want to receive. Those modifications to an auditor's opinion can have a negative effect on your bond rating. The next section of the report starts on page 4 and is titled Management's Discussion and Analysis. Now this goes from page 4 through page 20. And the benefit of this section of the report is that it provides the users a very quick way to assess the financial activity of what occurred for the city this last fiscal year. And besides the council and management, the other users of this financial statement are going to be bond rating agencies. And their question is, did the financial condition of the city improve or decline from the previous fiscal year? Now, they can go through 250 pages worth of information, or in the MD&A on page 9, there's a financial statement titled Statement of Activities. Now, the third row from the bottom is titled Change in Net Position.
James, can you zoom in?
The change in net position. Now, this is broken down between what's called the governmental activities and business type. Governmental, this is the general fund, your grant programs, your debt service fund, and your capital project fund. The business type activities, these are the utility funds. But the third row from the bottom, on the change in net position for the governmental funds, there's an increase of $6.3 million. There's a deficit in the business type of $762, but citywide, the net position, this is the second column from the right-hand side, the net position increased $5.6 million. Now, if that number is a positive, it indicates that the financial condition improved over the previous fiscal year. And so citywide, you did see a 5+% increase about a 3% increase in the net position from the previous fiscal year. Now, there are other pages that we're going to look at, all of which present a very strong financial condition for the city. The general fund balance sheet. On the left-hand column, down towards the bottom is the section titled Fund Balances. Now, the unassigned fund balance for the general fund at September 30th, 2020 was $18,461,342. This represents 39% of the annual operating cost of the city. Now, the city has a policy of maintaining a minimum fund balance of 25%. So this does exceed that minimum fund balance by, I think, between $6 and $7 million in excess of that 25%. Now, that committed fund balance in the general fund, these are purchase orders that were outstanding, that the city had committed to these purchases, but the actual services and or product hadn't been received from the vendors. So it's outstanding purchase orders, but again, it's going to be funds that are already committed and will be incurred in the next fiscal year. So it's not that we reduce the amount that's available as then assigned by those commitments. The next slide is the operating statement for the governmental funds. In third row from the bottom where it says change in fund balance. The general fund had a deficit of this last fiscal year of $59,194. And a year ago, I was here speaking to council about the annual audit report. And one of the topics that we were involved with was this is when the start of the pandemic. There were a lot of uncertainties. We didn't know what to expect, how our revenue is going to be affected. And so one of the things that most governments did was kind of hit the pause button on some big projects. And I think we're going to look at a financial statement that's going to portray that. We don't know the significance. We didn't know the significance. So in regards to progressing in a conservative manner, I think some projects may have been said, just put on pause and let's wait and see what's going to happen. Well, a lot of funding came through from various stimulus programs. So y'all's net result for the general fund was a $59,000 deficit. And we're going to look at the actual budget comparison that will portray that, delaying certain projects. Next slide is going to be the operating statement for the business type activities. Starting on the left, the water wastewater fund, third row from the bottom, a deficit of $290,000. Environmental services, surplus of $167,000. And the other enterprise funds, which is the 700 Main Center and the Community Center, had a deficit of $639,000. And this is primarily the Community Center. The rentals, less than 50% of last year because of the pandemic. So this resulted in a fairly significant deficit, which is not common.
What page are you on?
This is on page 33 at the bottom of the page, page number 33.
Would you just read the deficit numbers again so we know what line you were on?
Okay, third row from the bottom.
Okay.
Left-hand column, water wastewater fund deficit of $290,000. Surplus and environmental services of $167,000. Other enterprise funds, which is the 700 Main Center and Community Center combined with and golf course also, a deficit of $639,131.
Let me interject something here, Steve. Make sure council understands something about when it says deficit, it's just expenses over revenues, not really a deficit technically. Second of all, what you're seeing here is a full-blown accounting accrual method that you're using, which has depreciation expense, a full-blown like any other businesses. When you look at it from the budgetary standpoint, which is more of a modifier, that's where you have a bigger cash flow numbers situation. Here, it's taken more from a proprietorship, from a more business-like view of it. But once you start taking out the depreciation, all that deficit really goes there. But they want to account for all the usage of assets and everything else. So I just want to caution council, be careful how you read it. I can go further into it later, but it's just from a full accounting blown accrual method from the GAAP side, that's what by the law is required to state. It's stated, but when you start backing out depreciation, all these other items, it's much better than that.
And that number that Gill was referring to in depreciation is found in the middle of the page. Right above that bolded total operating expense is the line item for depreciation by fund, and where you can see the water wastewater depreciation expense for the year was $8,975,000. Again, that's a non-cash expense. I do want to jump over to the budget comparison. Okay, now, this financial statement shows the original budget. This is the budget that council adopted prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. And if you look at the third row from the bottom again, the change in fund balance was estimated to be a deficit for the general fund of $4.5 million in regards to the original budget for the 2020 fiscal year. Now, as you went throughout the year, there were changes made to the plan. The budget was amended. The amended budget, same row, had a deficit of $5,469,000. Again, this is changes that were made to the original budget throughout the year. Actual results of operation was a deficit of $59,000.
Another way to look at this, sorry, Steve, and for interpretation, how y'all see the numbers usually is that negative $4.6 million is a plan reduction in fund balance by using one-time expenditures. Makes sense. As a result of postponing all these major CIP projects and all that, we only reduced it by $59,000. So we're way ahead of the game from a cash perspective.
So that was the point I was making earlier, that there were projects put on hold. And so if you look at your estimated ending fund balance of $14,718,000 compared to this is the last row, $14,718,000 to the actual ending fund balance of $20,128,000, there actually was a favorable variance from actual to final amended budget of $5.4 million. Now, the last thing I want to present is what's called the schedule of federal awards. As part of the audit, we also have to perform compliance testing with certain laws and regulations related to the federal programs that the city receives. And this is a schedule that presents the total federal awards for this last fiscal year. Total federal awards were $5,216,834. The biggest one was the coronavirus relief fund. That was $3.7 million. Another major program was the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, and that was $888,000. The actual total is on page 253. Excuse me. That's page 255, where it presents that $5,216,834. And so not only do we do a financial audit, we also have to perform test of compliance and test of internal controls over the federal programs. And the opinions are in this document, and there were no non-compliance issues identified, nor were there any weaknesses noted in the internal controls over administering and accounting for the federal programs. I'm going to stop there and answer any questions. If there are no questions this evening, I certainly would appreciate the opportunity to come back at a future council meeting if questions do come up after tonight.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you, and I've worked with you in the past, and I know that Gilbert and his team do an excellent job, and that makes your job a little bit easier.
Yeah, certainly appreciate their efforts. I mean, this is a long task, and this year it was different. We weren't able to spend as much time on site as we have in previous years, so this auditing via email, we want to get back to the old-fashioned way.
Yeah. We like
Sitting
to
across
talk.
the table.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all very much. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question of you, but I have a question in the report. I think it's from the website on page 268. It's more of a question for Ken, really. It shows water usage and, you know what I'm talking about, Ken? You could pull up 268 from, I think it was page 268.
That's in
That
y'all's
where it
file.
talks about waste or unbilled revenue, stuff like that? I'm over here.
No, it shows water usage, water billing.
Well, all that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's data, statistics, yeah.
In the last year, we had a lot of unbilled water usage in 2020. I mean, it's a huge amount. Why? Unbilled.
Okay.
If you pull up 268, you can see it.
No.
The information he's referring to.
I mean, it's
combined.
it's not light reading, I will say that.
Well, I know we don't charge water to the zoo and other places like that.
I think it's 268 in the financial report.
That was a cover page when they opened it.
average, it's bumps. That was a heavy year. What I'm looking at is, are you looking at the unbilled water?
Yeah.
That may have been part of our reaction to COVID. I know during that year, we didn't bill a lot of those times during that year because we were being proactive and looking out for the customers. It also includes the zoo and other facilities, parks, and those.
Okay,
We can get you a more detailed answer.
Yeah.
that'd be great. I'd like to
But
know.
every year there's, oops, sorry.
There is an amount.
Every year there's water that, goes unbilled, whether it's because we don't bill ourselves or it's just flushed out.
I understand that, but
or-
it's a huge amount.
Yeah.
It is.
It's the biggest percentage of all, last year was the biggest percentage of all the years on that page. I mean,
Oh, that 19%,
19.65%
65%.
was
We'll get you an
unbilled.
answer.
We'll get an answer on
I
that.
was just, it jumped out at me. I just wanted to know why.
Wait till we see the 2021 with the freeze and all the broken pipes.
Yeah, I could see if it was 2021, yeah.
Right, right, but this is not.
Well, I couldn't explain 20, and then if you look at the amounts too, the amounts consumed is actually not very much compared to the other years. But the amount that wasn't billed,
They fluctuate. I think the year 2019, that was a drought. I know that was a very dry year, and those will fluctuate over the years.
but if you look at the gallons of water consumed, it's the lowest in 2020 on this whole graph. But the gallons of water unbilled is the largest.
Is the largest.
on
And
the
I
graph.
believe, we'll check into it, but I believe a lot of it was from the COVID reaction.
Well, is it also, I mean, you've got water produced, and then you've got some consumed, and you bill for what's consumed. But if it's not consumed, then it's not billed for. So just looking at those columns, you've got water produced, what was consumed, and the difference would be what's unbilled because you produced it, but nobody bought it. Am I reading that right?
That's correct. I'm hearing
That's
it.
kind of supply and demand. And that we overproduced.
Well, we do produce more. That
I'm
is a
I'm not
given.
challenging it, I'm
And
just
there
trying
is
to.
always a water loss factor through our lines, our pipes, through flushing. We have to flush hydrants. We estimate those. That will always never be exactly water produced equals water consumed. You know, there's always a little bit of factor in there for that.
We'll look into it.
Yes.
So thank you for highlighting it. Great day to do that, right, Gilbert?
Good point, good point. I don't like that schedule anyway.
Let's just take it out.
Well, it's kind of deceiving a little bit, but anyway, yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem, we certainly appreciate the chance to visit with y'all. Our firm certainly appreciates the work, working with the city.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we go into executive session. So it's 7:21. We'll go into executive session. I'll take a 5-minute break.
April, you need to read them?
The City Council will recess for executive session on the 20th day of April 2021 at 5:22 PM. The subject matter of the executive session deliberation is as follows. Executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.087 to discuss or deliberate the offer to a financial or other incentive to a business prospect for the City Council seeks to have, locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the City of Victoria and with which the City of Victoria is conducting economic development negotiations. An executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property interest due to the fact that deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the city in negotiations with a third party.
Promise I didn't do that.